Ken and Momo search frantically, but the balls remain elusive. Momo, growing frustrated, mocks Ken for being unable to find such tiny things. Turbo Granny, sitting back and relaxing, shrugs, saying that perhaps some spirit or monster has already taken them. She explains that the marbles are filled with life energy, and spirits are naturally drawn to them because they believe collecting life energy can turn them back into humans. Panicking, Momo realizes that finding the marbles will be even harder, and she begs Turbo Granny for help, but the old woman merely shrugs and says, "Sounds like a you problem." Furious, both Ken and Momo begin stomping on her in frustration. The next day, as Ken enters class, some guys immediately start chatting with him, asking if he's dating Momo. Ken shakes his head, but the guys continue, urging him to set them up with her because she's a smoking hot baddie. In that moment, Ken finally notices Momo's attractiveness, but he's so overwhelmed by this realization that he starts punching himself to rid himself of impure thoughts. One of the boys, eager to stir trouble, says that Momo is easy, that she lets anyone sleep with her. This makes Ken snap. The power inside him begins to surge, and in a burst of anger, he grabs the boy by the collar, transforming into his superhuman form again. He warns the boy to stop spreading rumors about Momo, and the boy, terrified, falls to his knees. Ken quickly reverts back to his normal state and apologizes, though the other boys are left utterly confused by the sudden display of power. He hurries back to his seat, trying to hide his anxiety, but Turbo Granny, who has been lurking inside his bag, pops out and sarcastically asks, "Enjoying my power, huh?" Ken, panicking, grabs his bag and rushes out of the classroom. Finding a quiet corner, he demands to know what Turbo Granny is doing outside Momo's house. She explains that Seiko allowed her to roam free since she can no longer control him in her toy form. She also admits that her power is causing trouble for him, and if he allows her back inside, she can take the power with her and leave him alone. Ken, suspicious, stuffs her back into the bag and walks off, but as he's about to re-enter the classroom, he hears Momo's voice. He freezes, but she shushes him and grabs his attention. In that moment, he finally sees her face and realizes how cute she is, making him even more flustered. Momo chases him, but he manages to slip away, making her mood sour. Her friends ask if she had a fight with her boyfriend, but Momo insists they are not a couple. They tease her, saying Ken is a good guy because they heard he fought some boys in his class for badmouthing her. This only makes Momo more confused about why Ken is avoiding her now. Meanwhile, Era, a pink-haired girl with a superiority complex, spreads rumors about Momo. She believes Momo is a demon and that she must be stopped. Era is convinced of her own destiny as a hero, especially after one of Ken's marbles fell on her head during the chaos with Turbo Granny, giving her the ability to see spirits. Now, she carries Ken's precious marble in her pocket. Unaware of its true significance, later, during lunch, Ken and Momo sit together. Ken is still avoiding Momo, and Turbo Granny, lurking nearby, reveals that she found one of the golden balls. She explains that the girl who found it, Era, might now have spiritual powers, which could put her in danger. Momo is concerned, and Turbo Granny offers to introduce them after school to help. As they meet after school, Era approaches Momo, asking to speak privately. Momo agrees and tells Ken to wait for her. After they leave, Turbo Granny reveals that Era is the one with the marble. Momo follows Era to an abandoned warehouse, where she and her friends ambush her, pinning her to the ground. Era attempts to perform an exorcism with a cross, but Momo uses her powers to toss the attackers into the trash. Era is now convinced that Momo is truly a demon, especially when the cross doesn't work. She presses Ken's marble to Momo's face, calling it a holy weapon to defeat evil. Momo tries to explain that it's just Ken's marble, but Era refuses to believe her. Just then, Ken arrives. And he tells Momo that Era isn't the villain here, someone else is targeting her. Before they can discuss further, an evil spirit appears, attacking Era and claiming to be her departed mother. The spirit explains that she has been watching over Era for years, and now that Era can see her, she wants to stay with her forever. Ken tries to save Era but is overpowered. The spirit devours him, and Momo struggles to free herself as her hands are tied. The spirit swats her away and swallows Ken whole. She tells Era she has waited 10 years to be with her, ever since she first saw her as a child. Era, unable to process it all, asks the spirit if she is not Momo's ally. Momo, emerging from the rubble, demands the spirit return Ken. Realizing that the spirit isn't connected to Ken, Era reluctantly agrees to join forces with Momo to defeat it. Momo doesn't want anything to do with her, but as they argue, Turbo Granny crawls out from the wreckage with a smartphone she swiped from Momo's friend. She searches the internet, discovering the spirit's name, Acrobatic Silky. Silky, enraged, devours Era, blaming Momo for corrupting her mind. With her hair, she begins to trap Momo. Momo, using her powers, finally sets Silky on fire, causing the spirit to release everyone she has consumed. Transported back in time, remembering when she was still a human. In this flashback, Silky is frantically running through the city, searching for her lost daughter. This memory amplifies the intensity of her anger as she feels the same grief over Era being taken away from her. Silky curses both Ken and Momo, blaming them for taking her daughter. She then begins to throw steel beams at them with her hair, forcing them to run through the narrow spaces of the warehouse. As they flee, Momo tells Ken she has a plan, but before they can act, Silky catches up with them. With swift, powerful movements, she knocks Momo away, turning her attention to Ken. Despite her fury, Ken's transformation allows him to evade Silky's hair attacks while carrying Era. Silky, using the warehouse's tricky layout and her acrobatic skills, closes in on Ken and lands a powerful kick that knocks him away. Era, now unconscious and defenseless, lies vulnerable as Silky moves toward her. Silky has come to terms with the fact that Era will never call her mommy again. Still, she doesn't want to let her go. The only way Silky sees to stay with her forever is to devour her. She begins to walk toward Era, but suddenly, she finds herself unable to move. Silky, confused, wonders what is happening. Just then, Momo steps forward, explaining that Silky's own power has turned against her. Silky's hair can bind anything, but once it grabs something, she cannot release it. That's why she is stuck. With Ken's support, Momo seizes the opportunity to act. As Silky struggles to break free, she starts destroying the steel beams to escape. In response, Momo grabs Silky's legs using her power. She tells Ken to go full throttle and blow the spirit away, but Ken is hesitant. He explains that whenever he used his power at full strength in the past, it was in desperate, life-or-death situations, and he isn't sure if he can do that now. Momo urges him to kick Silky with all his might. As they bicker over what to do next, Silky tears through their combined powers and attacks again. In a desperate move, Momo kicks Ken out of the way, saving him from Silky's attack. She tells him to hurry up and deal with the spirit. As Silky's hair grows back and she attacks Momo, Ken activates his power, charging towards Silky with all his strength. He slams into her with a headbutt, sending her crashing through the wall and into the next building, knocking her out. Momo is impressed by his strength, but Ken is already exhausted. Turbo Granny kicks him, explaining that he could only use her power once. Momo, unsure of what to do next, asks Turbo Granny if they should call her to finish off Silky. However, Granny tells her not to bother. Silky absorbed one of her attacks and won't be able to fight again for some time. She reveals that Era holds the golden ball and leaves to retrieve it. Momo, still confused, wonders how the girl is connected to Silky. Turbo Granny finds Ken's golden balls and, while he rejoices, she drops a devastating bombshell. Era is dead. Ken and Momo rush to her side and check her pulse, but it's gone. Turbo Granny explains that it's not surprising, considering that Era was swallowed by a spirit. Since she wasn't strong enough, she didn't survive. Momo, desperate and emotional, tells Granny to shut up and calls for an ambulance while she attempts to revive Era. She tries jump-starting the girl's heart by squeezing it with her power, while Ken gives her mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, but nothing works. Then, Silky awakens. The spirit tells Momo that she wants to help bring Era back to life. She asks Momo to take her aura and give it to Era, as it will provide the life force needed to revive her. Momo, unsure if she can trust Silky, accuses her of wanting to devour them again. Silky, in an attempt to prove she means no harm, tears apart her own mouth, rendering herself incapable of eating anyone. Momo is stunned, but Turbo Granny tells her that using Silky's aura is the only way to bring Era back. Despite her reservations, Momo tells Ken to transform and stand by, just in case Silky tries anything. Momo grabs both Silky's and Era's auras, acting as a channel for the transfer. As Silky's aura leaves her, the spirit begins to remember her past. She recalls being a single mother, working multiple jobs to support her daughter. She even resorted to prostitution to make ends meet, as her daughter was the only source of happiness in her life. They had been happy together, until one fateful night. Two thugs broke into their house, beating Silky and abducting her daughter. Silky searched for her desperately, but collapsed on the road and died. Her spirit wandered, unable to move on. One day, a young Era accidentally touched Silky, thinking she was her mother. Era did not know that Silky was a ghost, but when Silky saw her, she believed this girl was the daughter she had lost. Her memory of her daughter's face was fading, but she convinced herself that this was her new purpose, to protect Era. She turned into a monster for her, losing herself in the process. The flashback ends as Momo finishes transferring Silky's aura into Era. Momo collapses, exhausted. Ken, fearing Silky did something to Era, is ready to fight again, but Momo stops him, her eyes filled with tears. She tells him that she saw Silky's memories. Suddenly, Era wakes up. Silky, with great emotion, apologizes to Era for turning into a monster and hurting her when all she wanted was to protect her. As Silky disintegrates, Turbo Granny explains that Silky gave all her aura to revive Era. Since Silky still has regrets, she cannot pass on to the afterlife, and her existence will be erased. Nothing can bring peace to Silky's troubled soul. Silky, as she turns to ash, regrets her life and wonders if her daughter would have been better off if she had never been born. In a moment of clarity, Era runs to Silky, calling her mom and thanking her for everything. Silky, her memory now fully intact, finally remembers her daughter's face. That act of recognition brings peace to her troubled heart. Era and Silky cry as the spirit finally turns to dust. Era prays for Silky's peaceful journey to the afterlife, vowing never to forget her.